Welcome back. The topic for the day is learning curve. Now, before we jump into the topic, let's see the words of one of the most renowned soccer players in the world. So what was Messi doing for all these 17 years? He was repeatedly playing football so that he became faster and better. And so what does it mean? Repetition will make you faster and better. So extending the same logic to a business environment, when laborers manufacture a particular product repeatedly, they become faster and better. So this is what the learning curve is all about. Now we will start off with a very small example. Suppose you are working in a factory and you've just started off. That is, you're just learning. So the time taken by you to make the first unit is 50 hours. That is, for making the first unit, you have taken 50 hours. Now the time that you take for making each individual unit is known by the term incremental time. Incremental time means additional time. That is the additional time that you take for making each unit of the product. Now you're going to make your second unit. Now you've learned a bit more, which means that you're faster. So the second unit you made in just 30 hours. Now coming to the third unit. Third unit you took just 25 hours because you've learned a bit more. You've become much more faster. Now as for the fourth unit, you took just 23 hours. Now we have learned everything. You're an absolute master in making that product. So when you started making the fifth product, you again took 23 hours. Why? Because you've already learned everything now. There's nothing more to learn. So this is the maximum speed with which you can make the product. And as for the sixth unit also, you're taking the very same time, that is 23 hours, which means that from the fourth unit, you're a master. This situation where you've already learned the maximum, that is, there's nothing more to learn, is known as the steady state. So in this particular example, you have reached the steady state from the fourth unit. That is why it's written here, from the fourth unit, it is steady state. What do you mean by steady state? Steady state means there will be no further reduction in the time taken because you're already a master. You've already learned everything what is to be learned. So this column, that is, the time that you take for making each unit is known by the term incremental time. Just put that fact in your mind. Next, we will see what is the total time that you have taken at each point of time. That is, after you finished making the first unit, you took 50 hours. So 50 hours is the total time. So I've written 50 hours here. That is, after the production of the first unit, you've already taken 50 hours. Now coming to the second unit. After you completed the production of the two units, how much time did you take? It is 50 plus 30 or 80 hours. So we are going to write total time 80 hours. And once you completed the third unit, how many hours did you take in total? It is 50 plus 30 plus 25, amounting to 105 hours. Now, instead of taking this total, we could also take the total time, that is 80 hours, which was taken for making totally two units, plus the incremental time or the additional time that you took for making the third unit. So 80 plus 25 will give you 105 hours. Now, coming to the fourth unit, what is the total time that you took for making four units? It is 105 hours. That is the total time that you took for making three units, plus the additional time of 23 hours, which you took for making the fourth unit. So 105 plus 23 hours gives a total of 128 hours, which means that once you completed four units, you've already taken 128 hours in total. Now coming to the fifth unit. Once you completed 5 units, you took 128 hours plus 23 hours, giving an amount of 151 hours. And the sixth unit, you took 151 hours plus 23 hours, giving an amount of 174 hours. So 174 hours is the total time that you took for making the 6 units. Next, we will calculate the average time, more specifically, the cumulative average time. So what is the average time that you took for making 1 unit? It is 50 divided by 1 or 50 hours on an average, because as such, we have made only 1 unit. Now for 2 units, what is the average time? It is 80 hours, that's the total time, divided by 2 units, that is 80 divided by 2 or 40 hours. So on an average, you took 40 hours per unit. And coming to the third unit, the average time is 105 divided by 3 units, that is 35 hours. And after the fourth unit, the average time works out to 128 divided by 4 or 32 hours. And after the fifth unit, the average time works out to 151 divided by 5 or 30 hours. And after the sixth unit, the average time works out to 174 divided by 6 or 29 hours. So what you have just seen is the cumulative average time. Now we will see whether there is any pattern that is existing in this particular table. If you notice here, when the units jump from 1 unit to 2 units, the cumulative average time reduced from 50 hours to 40 hours. The average time reduced. Reduced to how much extent? It reduced to 40 divided by 50, or it reduced to 80% or 0.8. And what is this 80%? The subsequent cumulative average time, that is 40 hours, is actually 50 hours. That's the original cumulative average time multiplied by 80%, because 50 into 80% will give you 40 hours. So what they are saying is, when the quantity doubled, that is the quantity doubled from 1 to 2, the cumulative average time reduced to 80% of the original average time. That is the meaning of this 80%. Now we will see what happens if the quantity doubles again. That is, it jumps from 2 units to 4 units. So what has happened? The cumulative average time reduced from 40 hours to 32 hours, which means that again the percentage drop is 32 divided by 40. So that's what I've written here. That's equal to again 80% or 0.8, which means that there is a pattern in which the cumulative average time is dropping. So this pattern is known as the learning effect. So what is learning effect? Learning effect means as the output doubles, the cumulative average time per unit falls to a fixed percentage of the previous average time. So what was the previous average time initially? It was 50 hours and it has dropped to a fixed percentage. And what is a fixed percentage? 80%. Again, when the quantity doubled, that is from 2 to 4 when it doubled, again it dropped by another 80%. So this is known as the learning effect, or it is also known as the Wright's law. And this 80% is known as the learning rate, or R. Now think for yourself, if the learning rate was 70%, is it better or is it worse? Think. If the learning rate is 70%, that is, it's not 80%, it's 70%, then it is better for the company, because it means that the workers are taking lesser time. What is 70% of 50? 70% of 50 is just 35 hours. That is, a subsequent unit will be produced in just 35 hours time. So if you have a lower learning rate, it means that it is better. If you have a higher learning rate, it is bad. So let me write that too. Lesser learning rate is better. Now, for the cumulative average time, total time, and the incremental time, we will give some short forms. CAT, C-A-T for cumulative average time, T-T for the total time, and IT for the incremental time. I suggest that you use the CAT, the TT, and the IT while tackling the multiple choice questions, because nobody is going to see your workings and it will make you faster. But for the long questions, you have to write the long form, because the CAT, TT, and IT will not be familiar to the examiner. Now, what is the relationship between the cumulative average time, total time, and the incremental time? The total time is actually the units multiplied by the cumulative average time. So I'm going to write that on top of total time. And what is incremental time? Incremental time is actually the difference between the total time. If you see here, 30 hours is actually 80 minus 50. 25 hours is 105 minus 80. 23 hours is 128 minus 105 and so on. So incremental time, or it is nothing but the difference of the adjacent total time. Now what you're seeing on screen are the answers. Now we will see how the questions will appear and how to find out these answers. So I will show you what are the details that will be given in the question. Given the time taken for the first unit is equal to 50 hours, the learning rate is 0.8, and the third information that will be given is from the fourth unit, it is the steady state. So these are the three information that will be given in the question from which you will have to extract the answers. So what we will do is we will delete all the answers. So since the time taken for the first unit is 50 hours, against incremental time, total time, and cumulative average time, we can write the very same figure because only one unit has been produced and the time is 50 hours. We have completed the top row. Now, the learning rate is 80% or 0.8, which means that when the quantity doubles from 1 to 2, there is a drop in the cumulative average time. So the cumulative average time for 2 units will be 50 hours multiplied by 0.8, or it is 40 hours. Now, the total time is actually units multiplied by cumulative average time. So it is 2 multiplied by 40 or 80 hours. And the incremental time is nothing but the difference of the adjacent total time. So it is 80 minus 50 or it is 30 hours. Now, again, when the quantity doubles from 2 to 4, again, we have a learning effect. So the cumulative average time against unit 4 is 40 multiplied by 0.8 or it is 32 hours. And what is the total time? Total time is units multiplied by cumulative average time. So it is 4 multiplied by 32 or 128 hours. Now coming to the incremental time. What is the incremental time of the fourth unit? It is total time of 4 units minus total time of 3 units. But we don't know the total time of 3 units. So how do we find out the incremental time? It is just not possible under the tabular method. We will have to use the formula method. So the tabular method can be used only when you want to find the answers of the cumulative average time or the total time when the quantity gets doubled. But there is an important formula that you can derive from the tabular method. Cumulative average time for the first 4 units, that is, the answer is 32 hours. It can be arrived by using the formula y is equal to AR the whole raised to n, where A is the time of the first unit, n is the number of times the output has doubled. So we know that the cumulative average time is 32. So we will try to find that out. A is the time taken for the first unit. So it is 50 hours and the learning rate is 0.8 and n is the number of times that the output has doubled. How many times is the output doubled? Once, twice. So n is equal to 2 in this case. So substituting those figures in the formula, it's 50 into 0.8, the whole raised to 2, which will give an answer of 32 hours. So we got the right answer of the cumulative average time for the first 4 units. Now the same formula can be used if the question asks you to find out the learning rate. The learning rate will be missing in the question. So let's try that out too. So the formula is the cumulative average time for the first 4 units is y is equal to AR the whole raised to n. Now in this particular case, the learning rate is not given. That's missing in the question. But what will be given in the question is the cumulative average time, that is y will be given. And A, That is the time taken for the first unit, 50 hours, that will also be given. And since it is the first 4 units, we ourselves know that the quantity has doubled twice. So we know that n is equal to 2. That will not be specifically given in the question, but since it is 4 units, we know that it has been doubled twice. Now substituting those figures in the formula, 32, that's the cumulative average time which would be given in the question. 50, that's the time that is taken for the first unit, that's 50 hours. R is unknown and 2 is the number of times that the output has doubled. So since it has doubled twice, we are taking n as 2. So how do we solve this? 32 divided by 50 is equal to r squared. 0.64 is r squared. Square root of 0.64 is r, and r is 0.8 or 80%. So we have arrived at the answer of the learning rate. So whenever learning rate is missing in the question, or you are asked to find out the learning rate, please adopt this formula. Now, this formula has been derived from the tabular method. Now we will go to the main formula for calculating the cumulative average time. So the formula for calculating the cumulative average time is given by y is equal to ax the whole raised to b, where a is the time taken by the first unit, x is the cumulative units, and b is equal to log r divided by log 2. And what is y? Y is nothing but our cat, that is a cumulative average time. So in order to calculate the cumulative average time, that is including for unit 3, 5, and 6, we can use this formula. Because under the tabular method, we can calculate the cumulative average time only when it is doubled. That is for 1 unit, 2 unit, 4 unit, 8 units, 16 units, you can calculate. But for the intermediate units, we will have to use this formula. Now we can start off with each and every question that will come from the learning curve topic. In the question, just 3 details are given. The time taken for the first unit, the learning rate is 0.8, and the steady state is achieved from the 4th unit. So question number 1, calculate average time per unit for the first 4 units. Average time. Average time is nothing but our cat. That's the cumulative average time. So we will be using this formula, y is equal to ax the whole raised to b. So first we have to calculate b. And what was b? B is log r divided by log 2. We know that r, that's the learning rate, is 0.8. So it's log 0.8 divided by log 2. So it's 0.8 log divided by 2 log. That's equal to negative 0.3219. So I'm going to take 4 decimal places. Okay, so I've written the value of b as negative 0.3219. Now we will use the formula y is equal to ax the whole raised to b to find out the cumulative average time for the first 4 units. So A is the time taken for the first unit, that's 50 hours. X is nothing but 4 units. And B we have already found out as negative 0.3219. So substituting those figures in the formula, we get y is equal to 50 into 4, the whole raised to negative 0.3219. 50 multiplied by 4, the whole raised to 0.3219 negative, which is equal to 32 hours. So we got the final answer. The cumulative average time for 4 units is 32 hours. The next probable question that can come from the learning curve topic is the total time for 4 units. Now we have already found out the cumulative average time for 4 units. So how do we find out the total time? Total time is nothing but units multiplied by the cumulative average time. That is 4 multiplied by 32, you will get the total time for 4 units. So that's what we're going to write here. Total time for 4 units is equal to the cumulative average time multiplied by 4 units. We already know that the cumulative average time for 4 units is 32 hours. So it's 32 multiplied by 4 units, giving an answer of 128 hours. So the total time for 4 units is 128 hours. The third possible question that can come from the learning curve topic is time taken for the fourth unit.
What do you mean by the time taken for the fourth unit? That is nothing but the incremental time. And how do you find out the incremental time? It is the total time for 4 units minus the total time for 3 units, correct? That is incremental time. But we don't know the total time of 3 units. So first we have to find that out. And for finding out the total time for 3 units, we need the cumulative average time of 3 units. Only then can we find out the total time of 3 units. So first we will calculate the cumulative average time for 3 units by adopting the very same formula, y is equal to ax the whole raised to b. B we already calculated, it is negative 0.3219. And what was A? A is the time taken for the first unit, that is 50 hours. And what is X? X is nothing but 3 units because we are calculating the cumulative average time for 3 units. So substituting those figures in the formula, we get y is equal to 50 into 3, the whole raised to negative 0.3219. So use the scientific calculator to solve this. You get the answer as 50 into 0.7021 or 35 hours. So this is the cumulative average time for 3 units. Let's fill that up. Now, what is the total time for 3 units? Total time is always the units multiplied by the cumulative average time. So it is 35 multiplied by 3. You get the total time of 3 units. So we will write that total time for 3 units, it's 35 multiplied by 3, giving an answer of 105 hours. So we shall fill that up in the table. In order to find the incremental time for the fourth unit, it is just 128 minus 105. That is the total time for 4 units minus the total time of 3 units. So we shall write that the time taken for the fourth unit is 128 minus 105 or 23 hours. So we shall fill up the table. Now, the fourth possible question from the learning curve topic is the total time for 6 units. That is, we have to find this figure, total time for 6 units. Now, in this case, you have to specifically note that we have attained the steady state from the fourth unit, which means that it is 23 hours which will be taken for the fifth and the sixth unit also, simply because there is no extra learning taking place and there will be no reduction in the time. So we shall write 23 hours against units 5 and 6. Now, can you tell me what is the total time? Total time for the 4 units, that's 128 hours, plus the extra time that you took for the additional 2 units to get the total of 6 units, correct? That is the total time for 6 units. So the answer is actually 128 plus 23 plus 23. So if you have to write it as a formula, we can write it is the total time for the 4 units plus the incremental time for the 4th unit, that is this, multiplied by 2. And what is this 2? 2 is the additional units that you have produced after attaining the steady state. That is, it is 6 units minus 4 units. So this 2 is actually equal to 6 units minus 4 units. And what is 4 units? 4 units is the number of units from which we have acquired the steady state. So the answer works out to 128, that's coming from here, 23 hours, that's coming from here, and the 2 units, that is actually 6 units, that's the total units, minus the 4th unit from which we have acquired the steady state. So the answer works out to 174 hours. So we key that in our table. Next, we have to study how do we calculate the cumulative average labor cost per unit. We will assume that the direct labor rate is $5 per hour. So what is the formula that we have already learned? It is CAT, that is cumulative average time. We have a formula. What is the formula for CAT? It is y is equal to ax the whole raised to b. But how do we calculate the cumulative average labor cost per unit? Now, to give clarity to you, I will draw the table. So this is the table that we have worked on for calculating the cumulative average time. So we have the CAT, that's the cumulative average time, the total time, and the incremental time. Now tell me, if the direct labor rate is $5 per hour, then what is the cumulative average labor cost? If the cumulative average labor time is 50 hours, then what is its cost? It's 50 multiplied by 5, correct? Time multiplied by the rate per hour is the labor cost, correct? So we will just multiply the cumulative average time by 5. So cumulative average time multiplied by 5 will give you the cumulative average labor cost. So I've just filled up. So it's 50 into 5, 250, 40 into 5, 200, and so on. Now, total time we know, okay? So what is the total labor cost? If we know the time and if we know the direct labor rate per hour, then it is so easy to find out the total labor cost, right? What is the total labor cost? Total labor cost is total time multiplied by $5. So that's what I've written here. So all that you have to do is multiply this column with $5. You will get the total labor cost. So we got the total labor cost. Now think for yourself. What is the relationship that existed in the cumulative average time? When each time the quantity doubles, there is a fixed percentage reduction, correct? And the reduction is 80%. Now look at the pattern that is coming in the cumulative average labor cost. It's the very same pattern. When the quantity doubles, the cumulative average labor cost is also reduced to a fixed percentage. And the fixed percentage again is 80%, just like the cumulative average time. So basically, the relationship that existed in the cumulative average time is the same relationship that exists in the cumulative average labor cost as well. So if we can find out the cumulative average time with this formula, where A is the time taken by the first unit, that is 50 hours, then we can very well find out the cumulative average labor cost per unit by just taking A as the labor cost for the first unit, because the relationship that exists for both are the same. So we will write that formula. Cumulative average labor cost per unit for the first 4 units, given the labor cost for the first unit is $250, that's this, and the learning rate is 0.8. So what is the cumulative average labor cost? It's exactly the same formula. So it's y is equal to ax, the whole raised to b. But the only thing that you have to change is A is the labor cost for the first unit. That is, here we had taken the labor time for the first unit. Here we will take the labor cost for the first unit. All the other things remains the same. X is the cumulative units and B is log R divided by log 2. So we will calculate B first. So R is 0.8. So it is log 0.8 divided by log 2. That's equal to negative 0.3219. This is something that we had calculated earlier. Now substituting the value of B in this equation, that is AX the whole raised to B, and in place of A, it's the labor cost for the first unit. So it is $250 and X is nothing but 4, because we are supposed to calculate the cumulative average labor cost for the first 4 units. So substituting, we get it's $250 that's coming from here, 4 that's coming from here, and negative 0.3219 that's coming from here. So the cumulative average labor cost works out to $160. So we have got the very same figure that we had calculated in our table. One more important point that you have to note is when batch is given in the question, that is time taken for the first batch is given. So please understand that the learning effect applies for each batch. So in such cases, under the tabular method, please do not use units, but use batches instead, because the learning effect applies to each batch and not to each individual unit. Because the units in the first batch is produced in one shot, and then it's the second batch, then it's the third batch. So the learning effect will apply batch by batch. So the only thing that you have to put in mind is when batch is given in the question, the learning effect applies to the batch and not to the units individually. Now let's do a quick recap. Ideally, I suggest that once that slide is complete, you can take a screenshot. It'll help you while revising on the eve of the examination. Now, in the learning curve topic, there are 5 possible types of questions, out of which 4 questions can be done by using the formula method. So we will just refresh our memory about the 4 types of questions that we have already studied. So if the information that is given in the question is time taken for the first unit is 50 hours, and the learning rate is 0.8. And from the fourth unit, we get the steady state. Then the first possible question is calculate average time per unit for the first 4 units. That's nothing but the cumulative average time, or the CAT, given by the formula y is equal to ax the whole raised to b, where a is the time of the first unit, x is the cumulative units, that is the 4 units, and b is log r divided by log 2. Now, sometimes instead of asking the cumulative average time, they could also ask the cumulative average labor cost, which means that we have to adopt the very same formula with the only difference that you have to use A as the labor cost of the first unit instead of the time of the first unit. You basically use the very same formula, that is y is equal to ax the whole raised to b. Now, the second type of question that can come is total time for 4 units. So since we have already got the cumulative average time, total time is calculated by cumulative average time multiplied by 4 units. The third possible question that can come is the time taken for the fourth unit. Time taken for the fourth unit is nothing but the incremental time for the fourth unit. So the formula is the total time for 4 units minus the total time for 3 units. And what is the total time? Total time is nothing but the cumulative average time of 4 units multiplied by 4 units minus the total time for 3 units is cumulative average time of 3 units multiplied by 3 units. Always remember that in order to get the total time, all that you have to do is cumulative average time multiplied by the number of units. So you get the total time. Now, the fourth possible question that can come is total time for 6 units when steady state has been achieved from the fourth unit. So how do we calculate? This is the ultimate problem because all the details will have to be worked out. So the formula is the total time for the 4 units plus the incremental time for the fourth unit multiplied by 2. And from where did I get 2? That is nothing but 6 minus 4. Now, the recap questions that we saw just now are when R, or the learning rate, is given in the question. Now, there is one more type of question where the R will be missing from the question and you will be asked to find the R, or the learning rate. So which formula should we use? We will invite someone really special to do that final bit of recap so that you will never forget that formula again.